So, you guys know I've been speaking Japanese for a little bit over 10 years now. I started when I was about 14 or 15, and now I'm 27, turning 28. So it's been such a huge part of my life. I've translated at anime conventions. I've worked in the Japanese music industry. I've taught people Japanese as well. It's been such a really good foundation for my life, and it's been such a great ride. So today's video, what I thought would be very helpful for a lot of people is I'm going to Google a lot of misconceptions about the language. Not just culture, but probably something you hear in anime a lot, or maybe just a word in general that you might hear, and maybe people use that word wrong, or maybe there's like some misconceptions. So I think this will be very, very good. So if you're learning Japanese, this is actually going to help you quite a bit. So if you do like the video, guys, please, if this adds value to you in any way, subscribe, like, and of course comment down below any questions, or maybe even your thoughts on some things, because this is a huge topic, right? Because Japanese language is not as straightforward as a lot of people think. So without further ado, I'm going to Google some things that I can find. So I'm over here on Bond Lingo, and I found some here, and I actually do think these are quite notable, not just for Japanese speakers, but also for people who just were always wondering. This took me a while to get over. I will be completely honest with you guys. So I'm just going to put it very simply, because I'm so glad that this person, of a friend of mine from years ago, told me this. Aru is for things that do not have a heartbeat, so it's more of objects. So you can say something like keitai ga aru ka? Keitai ga aru. Like, do you have your phone? I have my phone. So something like a phone, even like this chair, this monitor, this keyboard, keyboard ga aru ka. It's objects that don't have a heartbeat. Iru is things that do have a heartbeat. So if you want to say, hey, if you want to say, I have a dog, inu ga iru. Inu ga iru. This is something that has a heartbeat, right? Or let's say you want to go to a party or something of the nature, and you want to say, oh, are there people there? Hito ga iru ka? Like, is there people there? Foreigners' mistake too is kawaii and kowai. I've heard this since even before I was kind of, now that I realize it, before I even started studying Japanese, this was used wrong all the time. Kawaii means cute, and kowai means scary. These are two completely different things, but the issue and why this happens a lot is because people don't understand that you don't pronounce things in Japanese, at least the vowels, the same way that you do in English. And that's one of the main reasons why this happens. So they'll end up going, oh, kawaii, and it's like, no, you mean to say it's cute, right? Like, you're talking about a child. You say her child is scary? You say she got an ugly baby? Like, that's rude. No, but you kind of get the point. You gotta learn how to pronounce vowels in Japanese, and it makes it a bit easier to remember that way. So yeah, be careful with that. Foreigners mistake 3, oni and ani. I do not think people mistake these. We don't live in a time where ogres are a thing. Like, there's absolutely no reason why people should be saying oni. Maybe, if they're like in a book club, or maybe they've seen like a drama or an anime manga they're talking about, but this isn't something that's like common. This isn't like every day, right? This kawaii and koi, that's every day. I'm such an asshole. No, but foreigners mistake 4, kawaii so and kawaii. Yeah, I made this mistake as well. So with so, when it's at the end of an adjective, for some words, it can mean like a lot. But with kawaii so, it means poor, but more as in poor you. Like, let's say you got into a situation and you're like, oh dude, my bike broke. You'll be like, oh, kawaii so, like, oh, poor you, oh dude, that sucks. Pronunciation, yeah, ame or ame, or hashi hashi, hashi and hashi, or hashi. So there's a trick around this actually that I learned when I worked in the music industry, and they explained this to me. They were saying, believe it or not, you don't have to pronounce it right. Well, you do have to pronounce it right. So the trick around it would be, you need to form your sentence in a way to where the 3 different or 2 different meanings, it doesn't even matter, right? So if I'm in a restaurant and I'm talking with the waiter, hashi ga arimasu ka? Very obviously in this type of setting, and based off the context, I'm very obviously talking about chopsticks. I'm very obviously talking about chopsticks. So for those of you who don't know, one is chopsticks, the other one is bridge, and the other one is edge. A lot of Japanese language is context, and if you form your sentences in a way that you can, omit one of the two, like if you're driving and you mention the word hashi, obviously you're talking about like a bridge, because the way that you're forming your entire sentence, it makes it that much easier, right? Or at least that's what I was taught, and it does help because again, you're forming it in a way to where it's kind of obvious you're not talking about these two. I think that's actually it for Bondlingo. Let's go look for another one. So I was actually able to come over here to japantoday.com. The name of the article is Top 5 Myths About Learning Japanese. Number 5, you need to learn Japanese from a native speaker in a class with a textbook. This is false because I actually didn't have anybody for the first 4 years of me teaching myself. So my story is that I taught myself, and I actually just translated a lot of music lyrics in my free time whenever I was done with school and things of this nature. So when I first started, I didn't have anyone, and it kind of just kept going. It happened utterly by accident, believe it or not. So I don't think that this is necessarily true. I think the number one thing is how much due diligence you have to continue going. So yeah, I personally don't agree with this at all in any way, shape, or form. Now, obviously, is it like the best preferred way? I think it's the best preferred way, but I don't think that it's the only way. There's a lot of different ways. You even have YouTube now. You have people like Japanese Ammo. She's the number one that I can think at the top of my head, and I'm pretty sure this Japanese Pod 101. They've been around since I started studying years ago. And then there's books like Genki, even though Genki causes some people to scratch their head, but there is Genki. And there's also other types of children's books with very, very easy hiragana, if you understand that. So there's a plethora of things. So this one is 3 myths rolled into one, but they're all very pervasive, so let's shut them down one at a time. Yeah, it's not really, really good. You can't learn Japanese through anime or manga. This is also extremely false. Even though your Japanese is going to be more casual, it's going to be a bit more, I guess you could say playful is going to be the word I'd use. And it also depends on what type of anime you're watching. If you're watching more serious anime, to be honest, you might actually have some keigo to that you'll learn, right? Because they're more formal, they're a lot more on the serious side. But if you're watching like Nichijou or Naruto, or even Dragon Ball Z, to be honest, and it's in Japanese, your Japanese is going to be a lot more casual. Like my Japanese is actually very casual. I do know keigo actually, but it just rolls out a lot better when I don't use keigo, which is really, really bad. But it is something that's pretty. This is so false, and it's really funny because when I did go to college for the first time and I took my Japanese class, one of the things the teachers was saying is, I don't care what you have to do, just consume as much as possible. I don't care if it's anime, it could be hentai, it could be manga, it can be Japanese news, you can play gacha games in Japanese. It doesn't matter. Your teacher is going to at least say just consume. Now obviously they want you, they would prefer you to consume very certain things so you can actually learn Japanese, but something is better than nothing, and I think that's kind of where that goes. Consume something over nothing, and I think that's where the native, learn Japanese from a native speaker with a textbook. Yeah, no, if you're consuming all the time, it doesn't really matter, right? Because just by nature, us as humans, we pick up on things naturally. So I don't necessarily think that's true. I'm not sure where this myth came from, but it's one of the most popular ones among my students. Usually the first time, I suggest we start getting out of textbooks and go into some real Japanese via manga or anime. They'll laugh and say, but that's not real Japanese. And it's really interesting because when I started watching, you know, anime and things like this, it helped me a bit more to actually communicate with people. Because what I found is that, at least with anime, in some ways more than none, it's more realistic on how people kind of talk. Now, obviously, I can't express this. It depends on what kind of anime that you're watching. If you're watching something that's like super fantasy, super, you know, crazy, you're probably not going. It's not going to translate very well, right? So it utterly depends. It utterly depends. Honestly, it does. You don't need to learn hiragana or katakana right away. This is complete bullshit. These are literally the first two things you need to learn. So many students want to rush into learning how to speak Japanese that they often run right past one of the most important parts, learning Japanese alphabet. Yeah, don't run past that, guys. Learn it. You need to use native Japanese words instead of borrowed foreign words. What do you think katakana was invented for, actually? You need to use native Japanese words instead of borrowed foreign words. This doesn't make any sense because the whole point of katakana is taking words from other languages as a whole, usually English as a whole, but you know, you just have your own writing system for it to identify that, right? They also use onomatopoeia with it, you know, so that is a thing, but it just doesn't make sense. Technically speak English and get away with it in some ways, because there's so many words in katakana that just translate straight to Japanese, even if you say it in your American dialect. So it tends to just happen like that. It's just the way it is. Kanji is the hardest part of learning Japanese. This is like true but false. It just depends on the person. But most Japanese people will agree with this, actually. So I would say kanji is the hardest part, right? Especially since there's two different ways of reading kanji and when to use those readings and how to. And some have exceptions to the word as well. So kanji definitely can hold you back. It held me back for a while, I'm not gonna lie. Kanji it ruined my ego.